Wow. So today we're going to be talking about the French Huguenot settlement of Manakin Town. But before we do that, I wanted to introduce you guys to the Monacan Indian nation, whom the town is named after. Brief introduction here, I'm at themonacannation.com. It says when the first colonists arrived at Jamestown in 1607, they immediately met with Indian people on the eastern shore of Virginia. These Indians belonged to the vast Powhatan autocracy and spoke Algonquin languages. All right, so that's on the shore. Now, on the Piedmont and mountain regions of this area lived the Siouan Indians of the Manakin and Manahoac tribes. All right, the Siouan. Remember, shout out to a new breed. We had him on recently, explaining to us his ancestry, Siouan ancestry, Eastern Siouan ancestry. And this is another tribe that's Siouan. Very little, one of those tribes that we know little about. This is the Monacan nation we're going to be talking about today and what happened to them when the French Huguenots, aka Moors, as we're going to see, arrived. They had arranged in a confederation ranging from the Roanoke River Valley to the Potomac River, and from the fall line at Richmond and Fredericksburg west through the Blue Ridge Mountains. At this time, the Virginia Siouans numbered more than 10,000 people. They were an agricultural people who grew the Three Sisters crops of corn, beans, and squash, and they had domesticated a wide variety of other foods. And I just want to add that these Siouan tribes, again, they're coming from the Ohio, a lot of the mound culture, mound builder culture, and ancient people. So they were people who brought the knowledge of the Three Sisters to a lot of these eastern tribes. That is something you can research. They lived in villages with palisaded walls, and their homes were dome-shaped structures of bark and reed mats. These Monacan ancestors hunted deer, elk, and small game, and they would leave their villages every year to visit their hunting camps. The Monacans traded with the Powhatans to the east and the Iroquois to the north. They mined copper, which they wore in necklaces, and which the Powhatans prized greatly. The Monacans also buried their dead in mounds, a tradition that differentiates them from the neighboring Indian nations. Throughout the Piedmont and mountain regions, 13 mounds have been identified and many excavated, yielding interesting information about the lives of these first Americans whose ancestors inhabited this region for more than 10,000 years. All right, so when we're talking about people living in this area of the James River, the Siouan tribes have been there a very, very long time already. They are referred to as the aboriginal people of this land. I also want to emphasize, the mounds, right? Again, they're coming from the mound builders. So, yes, it's logical that they would be leaving behind mounds. And also the copper. They know how to mine copper because, again, they're Ohio, their origin, they're a lot closer to these copper mines in Michigan and the Great Lakes. They had that knowledge with them already that they brought down with them. So, again, as it says in Encyclopedia Virginia, Monacan Indian Nation, says whose tribal area is located near Bear Mountain in Amherst County, the original territory of the Siouan-speaking tribe and its allies comprise more than a half of present-day Virginia, including almost all of the Piedmont region and parts of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Early in the 21st century, about 16,000 Monacans belonged to the tribe, one of the oldest groups of the indigenous people still existing in its ancestral homeland, and the only group in the state whose culture descends from Eastern Siouan speakers. They're Siouan. All right, just want to emphasize that. What happened to this Siouan tribe? So, real quick, I'm in the Huguenot Society of the founders of Manakin Town in the colony of Virginia. We're going to be talking about Manakin Town today again. So, it's here the Monacan Indians and Manakin Town. It says here in 1699, a Huguenot colony took the Indian land and established a settlement of their own. Uh-oh. Huguenot colony, what? Took. They took it. They weren't giving it to them, they took it from Monacan Siouan Indians. Through intermarriage with their white settlers or through uniting with other tribes, the Monacan population gradually decreased. All right, what happened? Intermarriage with who? These Huguenot. We're going to see Moors, settlers. All right, so real quick, we're just going to read this book. It says the history and present state of Virginia in 4 parts. All right, this is from, as you guys can see here, 1705. 1705, publication date, 1700s, this book. We're going to go to page 45 of this book where it starts talking about these French Refugees. Who is the first refugees? The etymology of the word refugee will tell you that the first people called refugees were Huguenots. Who are the Huguenots? We're going to get into that real quick, just for reference. But before that, it says here all the French refugees sent in thither by the charitable exhibition of His late Majesty King Williams are naturalized. They're talking about over here in Virginia and James River, Piedmont region. It says in the year 1699, there went over in about 300 of these, all right, 300 Huguenots, and the year following about 200 more, 200, that's 500 Huguenots, and so on, all right, and so on, till there arrived in all between 7 to 800 men, women, and children. They're talking about Huguenots who had fled from France on account of their religion. Protestants, right? Cryptos. The Catholics were after them, persecuting them. Most of them were cryptos. Who are the Huguenots? We're going to get into that real quick, just for reference. Those who went over there the first year were advised to sit on a piece of very rich land, about 20 miles above the falls of James River, on the south side of the river, which land was formerly the seat of the great and warlike nation of Indians called the Monacans, a warlike nation, the Siouans, ancient Siouans, none of which are now left in those parts. What happened to them? What do you mean they're not left? This is written in 1705, 1700s. What happened to the Monacans? But the land still retains their name and is called the Manakin Town. We're going to be reading about that today, what happened to Manakin Town. Who ended up with Manakin Town? The refugees that arrived the second year went also first to the Manakin Town, but afterwards, upon some disagreement, several dispersed themselves up and down the country, and those that have arrived since have followed their example, except some few that settled likewise at the Manakin Town. All right? Who settled in Manakin Town? What happened to them? They just disappeared? Really? Come on now. Again, I know a lot of people are new to this. They might have never known that the Huguenots were Moors. Just going over some information here that we've gone over many, many times. This is the book History of the Conquest of Spain by the Arab Moors by Henry Copey, written in 1892. We're on page 445. And right there, they're talking about Christopher Columbus and how he believed only Moorish civilization was good, and that his vessel was fitted out in that little port of Palos, which had lately been a Moorish port. His sailors were many of them men with Moorish blood in their veins. It has been asserted that when the Moors were driven out, thousands took refuge in the south of France, who afterwards, abhorring the Roman Catholic persecutions, became Huguenots. Who became Huguenots? Moors. Moors when they were driven out. Moors, right? Moors when they were driven out of Spain and Portugal. They ended up in southern France, became known as Huguenots, right? They're being persecuted by the Catholics. So this is a beef they had. Huguenots are Moors and Sephardic Jews as well.
Now, this article is called The Establishment of the Huguenots in Virginia. I'm just going to keep reading a little bit more of this history real quick. This is by Mary Wilson Bonahan Land, College of William and Mary, Arts and Sciences. All right. Now, it says here, before giving an account of the chief events relative to Huguenot history through the period leading up to the revocation of Edict of Nantes, it may be well to offer here some explanation concerning the origin of the term Huguenot, which was first used about 1560. Authorities have found it impossible to determine the true origin, right? So they don't really know the origin. They can't tell you, oh, Huguenot means this or that, and it's just some Christians. They don't, they're just making stuff up right there, all right? Because they've been trying to find the origin of this appellation, and many theories have been advanced and explanation. In the etymological dictionary of Cledat, we find that Huguenot is a deformation, the aligned Huygensnessen, confederaries, modeled Petrur, and it goes on. It says the formation of Huguenot from Huygenossen or Huguenot, seems to have first place among many explanations offered. As there was a party in Geneva at the time known by that name, it seems plausible that the French Protestants Protestants would have used the same term. Now, I was like, what does this mean? So, Huguenots, again, just want to make sure, Confederates. We got the etymology earlier, Confederates, right? And I actually got it in a Spanish Wikipedia, and I wanted to translate it, and it says, Eigengemeinschaft is a German word that means confederation. The term can be literally translated as an oath of camaraderie, right? And Eidgenossenschaft is a confederation of equals, which can be individuals or groups like states, formed by a covenant sealed with a solemn oath, all right? Such alliances can be limited in time or eternal, all right? They can be eternal, meaning it's still going on today, ladies and gentlemen. An important characteristic is that the parties are always considered equal, unlike the feudal society's oath of fidelity with their strict hierarchies, all right? So what are these Huguenots really? It says here, Huguenots, a name which the French Protestants are often designated. Its etymology is uncertain, they say. According to some, the word is popular corruption of the German Eidgenossen, conspirators, confederates. All right, conspirators, confederates, which was used at Geneva to designate the champions of liberty and of union with the Swiss Confederation, as distinguished from those who were in favor of the submission of Duke of Savoy. The close connection of the Protestants with Geneva in the time of Calvin might have caused the name to be given to them a little before the year 1550 under the form Huguenot or Huguenot, which became Huguenot. Huguenot. All right, you see how it be changing? All right, so under the influence of Hughes, Besançon Hughes being one of their chiefs, he was one of their Hughes or conspirators, right? Others have named after Hugon, a Count of Tours. All right, so they're trying to give us a whole explanation. This is from the New Advent online dictionary, the Catholic Encyclopedia. So now, real quick, just want to show this book, The Huguenot Bartholomew Dupuy and His Descendants by Reverend B.H. Dupuy. And down here it says, they declare their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers, Numbers 1:18. In this book, in the introduction, says the rise and progress of the Huguenots, origin of the term Huguenot. The term Huguenot was originally a designation given about the middle of the 16th century to the Reformed or Calvinists of France. All right, we already got those definitions. You mean a return of the order, the old ways, the order? All right, taking over, a changing of something. The origin of the word is involved in great obscurity. It's very obscure. They don't want you to know what it means, but then they tell us what it means, right? Professor Mann, the distinguished German philologist, all right, distinguished philologist of Berlin, has given no less than 15 explanations of its supposed derivation. The three most plausible need only be mentioned. It has been derived from a faulty pronunciation of the German Eidgenossen, Confederates who were called Huguenots, a term applied to the Patriotic Party of Geneva, who maintained themselves in the connection with French Protestants against the tyrannical attempts at Charles III, Duke of Savoy. They were trying to take over his kingdom. This was a favorite explanation of the origin of the word with those writers who represented the Huguenots as secret conspirators against the crown. So we're going to go back to the article we were reading earlier, basically, where it was explaining the establishment of the Huguenots in Virginia. We're just basically going over the name real quick of the references. All right, so continuing with that article, it says it is from these French provinces that originated the refugees who came to Virginia. And though it is not known from what localities all of them came, some few are known to have been natives of towns and provinces as follows. It says the family of Imbert came from Nimes, Lower Languedoc. And whoever knows about Languedoc, southern France, this part of France, that was Moorish from way back, like way back. It was part of the Iberian kingdom and the Moorish kingdom. This place was a Moorish place from ancient times and Europe. All right. It says the history of the Huguenots written for the American Sunday School. It says of the family was a settler at Manakin Town, Virginia. Manakin Town, Virginia. All right. From Matouban in Guyenne came Antoine Tarbet. So from Guyenne. So see, there's a place in France called Guyenne. Guyenne. You can say this Guyenne, Guiani, Guinea. A place in France called Guinea. Came Antoine Trabe. a Huguenot. In 1687, also one of the settlers of the James River. He died in January 1724. Also from Guiana, Guiana, Louis Latag went to Virginia, and for over 30 years was minister of South Firmham Parish, Essex County, Virginia. He was a man of blameless life and devoted to the work of the ministry. From London and Poitou come Jacob Pierre and Matthew Amonet, chiefs de familles de London, 1634. Jacob Amonet was one of the settlers of Manakin Town, right? It's a place actually named after the Manakin Indians. All right, so it says the birthplace of Oliver de la Muse, the founder of the settlement at Manakin Town, was not far from Nantes in Brittany. Here was the seat of the noble house of Lamuse Pontus. David, his son Caesar, and his grandson Olivier. Soon after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, Olivier de la Muse attempted to flee from France, but was arrested on the island of Ré. He was imprisoned in La Rochelle and Nantes, where every effort was made to persuade him to abjure, but without success, so he was finally expelled from France as a dangerous heretic. He was sent to England, from where he later came to Virginia on the Mary Ann in 1700. All right, the Mary Ann is a ship. All right. Also, a native of Nantes in Brittany was Paul Micau, who came to Virginia from England. From England, all right. So it's a French coming from England. All right, he might have been listed. Remember, they became American or British, right? They were starting to name themselves American or British. They were hiding their Huguenot history and settled on the Rappahannock in Essex County. Claude Philippe de Richebourg, the first minister of the Huguenot settlement in Virginia, came from Saint Sever in the province of Berry. Owing to disputes in his parish, he moved in 1707 with a number of his adherents to the Carolinas and was a pastor of the French church in Charleston. He died in 1719. It says the Manakin Town from Port des Barquis came Jacques Bilbot to Manakin Town, right? Jean Bilbot reconnait Metelet sa femme, oh that's French, 4,000 livres, fled from Port des Barquis in 1681 to England. Jacques Bilot or Bilboa, right? You see that? Balboa, Bilboa, Billabut. You see what I was saying earlier about the surnames, right? So Billabut, Bilboa, or Balboa in Spain, Balboa, Bilbot or Bilebo, all the same. These are Huguenots, right? AKA Huguenots. One of the inhabitants of Manakin Town, 1700 1723, was doubtless of the same family. At South BC was born Jean Pennetier, Jacques Pennetier, fugitive de Soubise. John Pennetier, naturalized in England, March 1682. Pennetier, one of the settlers of Manakin Town, Virginia, 1700. Chatelis in Saintonge was the birthplace of Jacques Fontaine, the Huguenot pastor, ancestor of the American families of Fontaine and Maury. All right, Maury, the Maury families, Huguenots. All right, plans and propaganda for the emigration of Huguenots to America. As has been said, the Huguenots fled from France in increasing numbers after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, principally to the Switzerland, Holland, and England. All right, they were all in all these countries. Many of them by reason of the privileges extended to them in these countries. Why did they have privileges in these countries? Think about that and remember that. Others, however, of more adventurous spirit or desirous of obtaining even more freedom, left these countries for America. But even after the Great Exodus in 1685, there had been a steady stream of partisans from France, beginning with the earliest days of their persecution. Several colonies were set up in America, some ending in failure, while others were more successful. It was but natural that many should be attracted to the English colonies of America, where they knew they would find many of their own religion or political ideas, right? And of which they had heard such inviting accounts of profitable trade and of lands of rich and agricultural promise, all right? A promised land. To encourage this inclination of the Huguenots towards America, as well as that of others who were looking with longing eyes towards this promised land, like I just said, towards this promised land. So the Huguenots coming here for what? Because they know it was a promised land, right? A few travelers of the period wrote in glowing terms of what they had seen and gave much publicity to their works, which became intentionally or not propaganda for attracting new colonists to America. Propaganda to get colonists to come to America. William Fitzhugh, as has been said, has tried to interest Hayward in sending French refugees to his lands, which later came to be known as Ravensworth, but he met with no success in that quarter. So he offered the lands himself in 1686, saying that for the French Protestants I have convenient and good land enough to seat 150 or 200 families upon one divided which contains 21,996 acres. All right, you hear how much acres this guy has? Is this like real? One guy has all these acres. Whose acres did he take? Whose land did he take to gain all this? And who took it? Who gave him the right? Which I will either sell them in fee of £7 sterling for every 100 acres, or else lease it to them for 3 lives, paying 20 shillings per annum for every 100 acres. The land I offer lies within a mile and a half of the Potomac River and of the two both navigable creeks. All right, you see, he's a Huguenot. He got all this land. From the Vestry Book of King William's Parish, Virginia, 1707-1750, we learn that as early as 1683, Baron de Sauncey seated a colony on the Lower James, having obtained permission from the English government to establish a colony of Huguenots in Virginia. The settlement was made in what is now Nansemond County, then known as Sutton Hundred. This was evidently not very favorable location for a colony, and no records of it have been discovered. From the same source, we learned that in the year 1687, 600 Huguenots came to Virginia, and that it is very probable that some of those settled on the lands offered by William Fitzhugh, some in Stafford and some in Spotsylvania. So we see that all through the 17th century, Virginia was constantly receiving the refugees from France, in large numbers and small, the number reaching its peak in 1700, when about 800 came over, many of whom settled at Manakin Town. It is these settlers who will now be our chief concern, it says here. And it says chapter 4, the settlement of Huguenots in Manakin Town. And it says, up James River is a colony of French refugees who at Manakin Town live happily under our government, enjoying their own language and customs. Their own language and customs. We're going to see what that is towards the end of the video, what it really was. I know you're thinking French and Protestant right now. The settlement of Huguenots in Manakin Town says plans for emigration had long been in the minds of those Huguenots who sailed from England in the year 1700. Plans which had been in the making for about 2 years, and which had been changed many times. Much had been done in London to encourage and aid in going into America, all right? They were encouraging this to go to America, those who had become interested in so doing, since many of the refugees had come to England with few or none of their possessions, and constantly required financial aid until they could establish themselves profitably. They required what? Financial aid. What does that mean? It means indentured servitude. That's the only financial aid they're going to get. Indentured servitude or a land grant, depending on their status and their connections and their money. Disbursements were made to those needing money from the Protestant Relief Fund, a Protestant Relief Fund, to get people to come to America. Listen to this. And it was from this fund that many were enabled to come to Virginia. They had a fund for these Protestants to come to Virginia. Records in the Library of Goodhall in London give an account of these disbursements. As for example, in June 1700, the sum of £38 was given to Mon Benjamin de Jeux, minister appointed to go to Virginia. Later in August of the same year, a request for £20 was made for M. Castaigne, one of the physicians among the refugees bound for Virginia. Later still in the same year, requests were made for money for such Vaudois and French refugees as designed to settle in Virginia. Much was done also in regard to actually finding them land in America where they could settle. Negotiations had first been made with Daniel Cox, proprietary of Carolina and Florida, for purchasing land in Florida. The second objective had been Carolina. Letters in regard to the third plan indicate that land of the Nansemond River in Norfolk County had been designated as their destination. When the plans were finally carried out and 4 ships sailed to Virginia carrying them 700 and 800 Huguenots, Manakin Town on the James River was to be the final destination for many of them. All right. Although those who came over in the first ship expected to settle in Norfolk County, Manakin Town, the place chosen for the Huguenot settlement, was the site of a deserted village of the Manakin Indians, 20 miles above Richmond. So they went into a deserted Manakin Town and took over the whole town, right? Why did the Monacan desert their town though in the first place? School books would probably tell us that the mannequins caught some disease and they disappeared and were extinct and blah blah blah, right? But in reality, they either got enslaved as indentured servants for these Huguenots, relocated to other lands and other states, reservations, or they again assimilated into their families, married into the indigenous people. And I'm saying this for a reason. All right, we're going to see that later on. So it says a slight digression will be made here in order to give some data concerning the Manakin Indians, who had village on the site which later was used for the settlement of the Huguenot refugees. The Monacans, the word is possibly an Algonquin one signifying a digging stick or spade, were a tribal confederacy of Virginia in the 17th century, who lived on the land of the upper waters of the James River above the falls at Richmond. They were allies of the Manahoac and enemies of the Powhatans, and their language differed from that of both of these tribes. They were finally incorporated with other remnants under the names of Saponi and Tutelo. All right. The settlements of the Monacans proper was known to the whites as Manakin Town. In 1669, they still had about 30 bowmen and 100 souls. All right.
Big up to the Saponi out there.
Yep. Yep. Shout out to Saponi to Telo nations. And so they're letting us know that in 1669, there were still Manakin people there. So what do you mean there was a deserted town? They just contradicted themselves. Francis Louis Michael, in the report of his journey from Bernay, Switzerland to Virginia, October 2, 1701, says, makes some interesting statements regarding these Indians. He says that the soil at Manakin Town is black and heavy. Is black and heavy. Black. The soil is what? Black. Black soil. When I say black soil, black land to you, black soil, what comes to your mind right now? The etymology of Kemet, if you don't know, Kemet, if you look at it right now, if you go look at it, Kemet, the real etymology is basically black soil, a fertile black land, fertile soil, black soil. Again, he says that the soil at Manakin Town is black and heavy, and so the Indians had reason to choose this place. All right, it was fertile. That was their place. That's why they were there. Today there is a red rough stone. Now there's a red rough stone. What did these Huguenots do? Now it looks like Egypt, modern Egypt, they're saying, red rough stone, standing 4 feet high out of the ground, where at certain times the Indians, held religious services, as they supposed about 30 years ago. They still dwelled there. But when they inflicted some injury upon the Christians, Claude Bourne, who was then living on the frontier, namely at Fallen Creek, mounted one of his company and attacked the Indians boldly. He soon overcame them and put all of them to the sword. Also destroyed their settlement and whatever they owned. So you see what happened to them, right? Indentured servants, most likely. As has been stated, 4 ships came to Virginia, bringing the refugees. The first of these 4 ships, the Marianne, and brought to Virginia July 1700, 207 men, women, and children. Many of these went to Manakin Town. The pastor Claude Philip de Richburg was among these, as well as the Marquise de la Muse and de Sally. On the second ship, the Peter and Anthony, which arrived in Virginia about September 20, 1700, there were 169 refugees. On board this ship was Benjamin de Jukes, who was the pastor. So de Jukes, Benjamin de Jukes, right? Dodge the hijack, who was their pastor, right? And was also the real founder and leader of the whole settlement of Manakin Town. Oh, the founder and settler, this de Jukes. In order to ensure that Huguenots would live happily in Virginia and to encourage colonization by them, they were accorded special privileges. 10,000 acres of land were donated to them. Okay? 10,000 acres of land donated to them. The best of the James River. The best on the James River, 20 miles above Richmond, being the deserted village of the Manakin Indians. A fertile, very fertile place, huh? What a coincidence. They were soon granted full citizenship. Oh, they got their citizenship. They got their nationality. Good for them, huh? Citizenship, nationality. Oh, they got a nationhood now. And were exempted from taxation for a period of 7 years. Oh, hold up. So why are they exempted from taxation and they're getting full citizenship? Why are they getting all these privileges? Man, these Huguenots. They were granted freedom of worship under ministers of their choice.
All right, so you guys see, so I just wanted you guys to see what happened. I just wanted to show you this historic marker here. As it says here, Huguenot settlement. In 1700, 1701, Huguenots, French Protestant refugees, all right, who's the Protestants now you know, aka Moors, settled in this region on land provided to them by the Virginia colony. The Huguenot settlement, known as Manakin Town, centered at the former site of a Monacan Indian town. Former site, what happened? All right. Located south of the James River, during this period, the Monacans and other Indian tribes traded with the settlers. In 1700, the Virginia General Assembly established the King William Parish, which enabled the Huguenots to have their own church, pastor, and set their own parish titles. Over time, the Huguenots obtained individual land grants on both sides of the James River and throughout this region. And from there, the Monacan history or people disappear, right? Or supposedly go extinct, right? They don't know what happened to them. They started being labeled so-called Negroes, indentured servants, Cherokee, or the Huguenots started assimilating or amalgamating with them. And that was the case many times. I think this is very important, like, again, a tribe that people really don't know, and they are Siouan. Just wanted to bring this to your attention. Let's remember the Manakin Nation, who had been living in this region for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They know people was living in this area up to 18,000 years. They have found evidence of human habitation that long in this area. Again, these are part of the mound building culture that was over here in the eastern shore. The Siouans that came down from Ohio. And these people were there for so long. And then here comes the Huguenots. Now they even take over their own town and call it Manakin Town. And then they're saying, well, we don't know what happened to them. They disappeared. We just inherited their town. Luckily, this rich, rich, rich land. And this wasn't the so-called white man that came took the land. Just want you guys to see. This was all planned. Virginia colony. They were given land grants. They were helped. These were refugees fleeing the Catholics and taking Indian land. Hope you guys enjoyed this quick presentation. I'm back to be doing videos again. I had a personal thing to take care of these days and family to attend to. So look out for many videos coming in the next few days. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much love and respect. Pura vida. Awa.